Welcome to Linguistics and More. Since December 2024, Donald Trump has escalated a campaign of territorial expansion rhetoric, demanding control of the Panama Canal, suggesting making Canada the 51st state, and repeatedly insisting on acquiring Greenland. At a January 7th, 2025 press conference, he refused to rule out military force. Then, on January 21st, 2026 at Davos, Trump called Greenland a piece of ice, cold and poorly located, while warning NATO allies, "We will remember," if they obstruct his ambitions. Today we'll use Norman Fairclough's framework to analyze how this speech uses language to construct power. Critical discourse analysis, or CDA, examines how language creates and maintains power relations. Unlike traditional linguistics, CDA asks whose interests discourse serves and how it naturalizes particular ideologies. Norman Fairclough argues that discourse doesn't just reflect power, it actively constructs it. Fairclough's three-dimensional framework analyzes discourse at three levels. First, the textual level examines vocabulary, grammar, and metaphors. Second, the discursive practice level explores genre conventions and intertextual connections. And third, the social practice level investigates how discourse relates to ideology and wider power structures in the world. Today we'll apply this systematically to Trump's Davos speech. First, at the textual level, Trump describes Greenland as a piece of ice, cold and poorly located. This minimization strategy reduces a territory with 57,000 inhabitants to raw material, stripping away questions of self-determination. The lexical choice transforms Greenland from a place with people into an object available for acquisition. Yet Trump simultaneously calls it an enormous unsecured island. Notice the contradiction. Greenland is both insignificant and strategically crucial. Minimization dismisses sovereignty claims. Magnification justifies intervention. These contradictory framings serve different rhetorical purposes. Very Trumpian. The discourse uses high-modality constructions that reveal power dynamics. Trump employs deontic modality, or the language of obligation, stating NATO shouldn't stand in the way. This reframes alliance structures as impediments. The threat "we will remember" uses absolute certainty, constructing consequences as inevitable, rather than conditional. Pronominal choices construct in-group, out-group boundaries. Trump shifts between inclusive we when invoking NATO and exclusive we when asserting American interests. This strategic ambiguity lets him claim alliance authority while pursuing unilateral objectives at the same time. The phrase "what we have given them" positions Europe as dependent recipients rather than equal partners. The discourse contains revealing presuppositions. The phrase "get Greenland" presupposes that Greenland is acquirable, like a commodity. This linguistic choice naturalizes territorial acquisition, bypassing questions about legitimacy. At the discursive practice level, Trump's speech mixes incompatible genres. He delivers diplomatic discourse at an economic forum, but employs nationalist rally language and business negotiation tactics. He says, "You can say yes or you can say no." This binary framing, appropriate for real estate, redefines diplomacy itself. The discourse draws on historical American expansionist rhetoric, echoes of Manifest Destiny and the Monroe Doctrine. By invoking these intertextual connections, Trump links contemporary claims to established narratives of expansion, lending them historical legitimacy. Trump merges security discourse with business discourse, creating interdiscursivity. Greenland becomes simultaneously a security necessity and a purchasable asset. This fusion naturalizes the idea that territory can be acquired through economic leverage blending colonial territorial logic with market ideology. At the social practice level, this discourse reflects and constructs shifting power relations within the transatlantic alliance. Trump's language challenges post-World War II norms of sovereignty and multilateral cooperation. By framing alliances as transactional rather than value-based, the discourse attempts to renegotiate the fundamental terms of international partnership. The discourse performs ideological work by naturalizing American unilateralism. When Trump describes his demands as reasonable and European resistance as obstruction, he inverts diplomatic norms. The language constructs a world where American desires automatically constitute legitimate priorities, while Allied sovereignty becomes an impediment. This represents what Gramsci called hegemonic struggle, the contest over common sense itself. Trump's discourse attempts to make territorial expansion seem natural, necessary, and rational. The linguistic choices work to shift the boundaries of acceptable diplomatic conduct. The discourse exemplifies securitization, using language to construct existential threats. By labeling Greenland unsecured, Trump transforms an issue into a security matter, justifying extraordinary measures. This linguistic move attempts to place acquisition beyond normal political debate. The language mirrors colonial discourse. Indigenous Greenlanders are entirely absent, their voices and sovereignty claims linguistically erased. The discourse constructs Greenland as empty space available for acquisition, replicating historical colonial discursive structures. The phrase "we will remember" functions as euphemistic threat. The threat is clear but linguistically implicit, allowing Trump to issue warnings while maintaining plausible deniability, characteristic of coercive diplomatic discourse. Trump's confusion of Greenland and Iceland reveals cognitive gaps about the very territory he claims is vital. This linguistic error exposes the gap between rhetorical assertion and actual knowledge, weakening the discourse's authority. This is where Fairclough's framework shows its power. The textual features, minimization, metaphors, high modality, pronominal shifts, function within specific discursive practices, genre mixing, expansionist intertexts, etc. These discursive practices reflect and construct social practices, the renegotiation of alliance structures, for example, and the naturalization of unilateralism. Fairclough's central insight that discourse doesn't simply reflect power relations, but it actively constructs them, is here plain to see. Trump's Greenland discourse doesn't describe a world where territorial expansion is normal. It attempts to create such a world through linguistic choices that naturalize acquisition, minimize sovereignty, and reframe coercion as negotiation. So we've applied Fairclough's three-dimensional framework to Trump's Davos speech, moving from specific linguistic features to genre conventions to broader questions of power and ideology. This analysis reveals how a single speech attempts to reshape international norms through language used. Understanding these mechanisms is essential for critical media literacy. For more linguistic analysis, thanks for watching Linguistics and More.